Well, hi, and guess what? Yes, you're right. It is time for another episode of Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet, whatever that may be and whatever we may encounter. Today, we get to chat with Katya Davydova, and I love something that Katya has in her bio, which is that she wants to create a more joyful world. And it doesn't get better than that. I like joyful worlds and all that goes with it. I think we spend too much time grousing and complaining about all the things we don't have control over anyway. So for me, it's always don't worry about what you can't control, focus on the things you can, and the rest will take care of themselves, which I think is always true. However, we'll see what Katya has to say about that. Anyway, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset.
Thank you so much, Michael. It is truly a joy, a delight, and a pleasure, all three, the trifecta, to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I really appreciate you agreeing to do this and coming on. Why don't we start with talking about kind of the early Katya, growing up and all that stuff?
Sure. Shall we begin from 13.8 billion years ago, the Big Bang? Or
sure, we could do that.
That'll be a very long podcast.
How sure are you it was only 13.8 billion years ago? Well, that's okay. Yeah.
And now you're asking the real questions. And are there multiple universes? Quantum physics, right? Let's go there.
We could.
We definitely could. I think just to keep it, like you said, what's within our control, right?
Okay.
The most I have control. Happy to start at the beginning.
A long time ago in a galaxy far away. Far away.
Exactly. So the words are right out of my mouth, Michael. That's exactly right. But I'll give the overall executive summary. And it's so funny to hear myself say the word executive because I work with executives. I just did yesterday and bled over. But anyway, was born in Uzbekistan, which was at the time, some people have called it a third world country. I think the term now is developing country. And it was a time of darkness. And then I came to the States. Happy to carry the conversation, Michael, where you would like for it to go. How do you suggest?
No, go ahead. So tell us about, maybe what you remember a little bit about growing up in Uzbekistan and then coming here and what it was like and all that.
Sure. Yeah. So
a framework, as it were.
A framework. I love a good framework, honestly. We'll talk about frameworks and principles in a little bit. But as a kid, I was used to, I was used to like not having too much because, we grew up in a little bit of, I don't call it poverty necessarily, but not having as much abundance as a quote unquote traditional American childhood might offer. But my family and I were lucky enough to emigrate to the States when I was a kid and came here not knowing a lick of English except for please and thank you. And where's the bathroom? Your three essentials.
That's an important one too. Yeah.
Of course. You got to know where the important places are and a little bit of gratitude and asking for help. And so as a kid here in the States, my family landed in Virginia and just kind of started living. I remember, if you're talking about pivotal moments, I remember walking into a grocery store and being absolutely astounded by the selection and the array of things available for purchase. Right. In Uzbekistan, we had to stand in line for food because that was the reality. And in America, you could buy like 16 different kinds of apple at your whim. It was incredible.
I was amazed when we moved to New Jersey and lived there for 6 years and went into the store. Mm-hmm. The number of different kinds of loaves of bread, the different kinds of bread, much different than here in California.
Yes. Would you say that it's more in New Jersey than California?
Oh, lots more. Yeah.
Really? Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Never could figure it out, but there was a lot more different kinds of bread and they were all very tasty, but a lot more different kinds of bread, I think. And I've never figured out. Well, maybe it's the Italian influence. Who knows?
Maybe New Jersey puts the new in new loaves of bread in New Jersey.
Could be.
Yes. So similar to that, right? Just the whole bushy-tailed, bright-eyed person looking at a grocery store aisle. But as a kid, I loved to play, as any old child would love to play, got good grades, went on to do well in school, and was really driven by noticing how people interact and helping to facilitate those kinds of interactions, relationships. In fact, I've been a peer mediator since 5th grade. So I think that really paved the way for being in the service of other people, right? Wanting to help others thrive.
So why do you think that you developed that interest?
Yeah, it's a good question. I grew up as an only kid, and I think I was an extroverted introvert or an introverted extrovert, but I was definitely very social with a healthy dose of shyness, right? Because I was like, oh, I don't want to make too much of a ruckus. And I remember as a kid, I would always interact really well with the adults, like at a dinner party, if my parents were having friends over. At school, I remember in third grade, I was asked to facilitate a group of adults who were visiting from some Russian speaking or Slavic speaking country. I was asked to like facilitate their visit. I was like, okay, like I can get along with adults. This is easy. Sometimes getting along with fellow kids was sometimes a challenge, not always. I got bullied just like any other kid or most kids, but was able to really dive into exploring conversations. And I think the why is that I'm not to sound self-aggrandizing, but I am a deeply curious person, and I love understanding how the world works. Which, Michael, I know that it is something that you and I share.
We do. And it's always fascinating to learn more about how the world works and when you make new discoveries and just get more insights too, isn't it?
Definitely, definitely, that's for sure. So, that's the
So,
overall synopsis of little young Katya.
so you went through school, went through high school, coped with all that, survived. Was all that in Virginia?
That was all in Virginia, yes,
And
right outside of DC.
what did you do for college?
I went to UVA. Go Who's!
Oh,
Love my Wahoos.
there you
Yes,
go.
yeah, and I studied cognitive science, psychology, and Russian there. So I had a double major and a minor, and did a thesis. Was on a lot of in a lot of clubs, a lot of committees, a lot of leadership organizations, and just really, I really think I maximized my college experience. Now, people always ask, like, Katya, what do you regret most about your college experience, or what do you wish you'd done more of? And honestly, I wish I partied more. Like I partied enough as it was, especially my first year of college, but I took school very seriously and did well in it. But I wish I had spent a little bit more time partying. I don't know if people say that typically.
I don't know that they do, but I appreciate it and understand it. The reality is that college and the whole social life is part of what we should do. Do you think that, I've had some people be guests on Unstoppable Mindset who have said that they didn't think that college really prepared them for life, that it was way too theoretical. What do you think about that?
Hmm.
It's an
Ooh,
interesting concept, I know.
it is. Michael, before we dive into that, do you have any theories or did they share any theories on why it was too theoretical?
They just felt that faculty and so on were not really from the working environment, that they came from a college environment. They didn't really have a lot of exposure to the rest of the world.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I can see that in some kinds of colleges, maybe some of the more advanced theoretical universities, but community colleges, maybe to a little bit lesser degree, state colleges, probably had more people who did spend some time out in the world, and maybe they would be different. That's kind of my perception.
Yeah, that's a great hypothesis. I can see how, potentially on both sides of the spectrum there's that sentiment. I think that UVA actually prepared me really well for school. I will say that the location of it, right in Charlottesville, Virginia, was very, or not very, it was insular to a degree. It felt like a bubble because it was this beautiful, blissful place
Yeah.
where, of course, bad things, of course, happened, but I felt very in community when I was both as
Yeah.
an undergrad there and also when I came back to Charlottesville as an adult. And I mean, my high school prepared me really well for college, so like I was used to the hard work aspect. But I also did a lot of things besides classes. Like I had a bunch of internships, I volunteered, had this amazing volunteer experience with uh, it was for specifically for men with comorbid schizophrenia and substance use disorders, and it was psychosocial rehabilitation. So imagine this like 21-year-old girl who's just like fresh and really brimming with excitement coming into this space where there was a lot of pain and there was a lot of struggles with substances, with alcohol, and I was like, wow, we can really see these humans for the human aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
Not the sum of their past stories necessarily. And it was just such a delightful and expansive time. I remember that as a very crucial part of my last year of college.
And you kind of wonder, why is it that some people go that way? Why do they overindulge in alcohol, much less drugs, and so on? And it's a fascinating question that I've never experienced any of that. I've never been drunk, have no desire to be drunk. Although I love to say that I feel sorry for people who don't drink, because when they get up in the morning, that's as good as they're going to feel for the rest of the day. But I listen to too much Dean Martin. What can I say? But seriously, I've never understood it, but I do appreciate that a lot of it has to do with covering up and just trying to hide from the world.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, there's so many factors, right? There's family history, there's genetics, there's nature versus nurture. My goal is to not blame, because I don't know the full circumstances. And
it's more understand than blame. I think blaming doesn't help anyone.
Exactly. But I think that just opened my eyes to the different ways that people show up in the different kinds of lives that people have. And it also made me, I don't want to say realize, because I've known this before, but it also affirmed how incredibly privileged I was and am right to this day, that I'm healthy, I'm generally happy, I've got a loving support network, a loving system, and I am lucky to have had the opportunities that I've had, both in education and grad school and work and relationships and the things I do outside of work. There's just so much to be grateful for, really.
I think a lot about being blind and not being blind, but one of the blessings that I feel I have is having never really dealt with different color skins. It's strange to me that people can be so antagonistic toward people who have different skin colors simply because of the color of their skin. For me, I don't care. I've never seen different skin colors. And I don't know what it would have been like if I had been able to see. But I would like to think that I'm a little bit smarter than that and really don't think that it really should matter.
Yeah. Michael, how do you think that's played out in your relationships? Because you're literally you cannot see color, right? So how has that shown up for you, and what has been the benefit to you in your relationships?
Well, so first of all, intellectually, I understand colors. Being I have a master's degree in physics, so we could talk about wavelengths and all that all day long. And so I understand it, and I appreciate that there are different skin colors intellectually, but it's the emotional part. So for me, it has never been an issue, and I've been able to walk around New York and places where people say, "Well, you don't want to go there because of different races and all that." And kind of my position is, well, I don't want to go where somebody's going to hate me, but at the same time, I think that a lot of the way that we behave determines how people behave toward us, and so I've just never really been bothered by it.
Yeah. I'm really struck by what you said. The way that we behave oftentimes reflects on how other people behave towards us. Can I tell you a quick story about that?
Sure.
It's very recent. Last night, I got back from a very, very long day. I was facilitating an offsite workshop on feedback skills for an executive team, and just had a whole bunch of things. I was out for almost 12 hours. And then I had to come home and actually start the work, right? Start both my day job work and my other work. And I remember just sitting there, I was so depleted. I wanted a nap. I wanted to eat. But I was like, okay, I won't take a nap. I'll eat, of course. But let me just give myself the gift of a walk before I dive into work. Because now it took, several decades to know that you shouldn't always push your body and your brain to 100% of the time, every single day. It's a lesson that I still struggle with. We can definitely come back to that. But as I was taking this walk, I remember just being so radiantly happy, just awing and marveling at the world, right? It was golden hour. Folks were out and about on their evening walks. I went to the dog park. There was so many puppies there. And several came over and sat down next to me. And I was just kind of walking through the streets, gallivanting, right? With a huge grin plastered on my face. I was just genuinely happy to be here, be alive, be in this world. And so many people smiled back, waved from their cars, honked, just exchanging these little micro moments of connection. I got to talk to somebody from their car. We were like looking at those little robot delivery robots, or the food delivery robots, and just creating these pockets for micro interactions among strangers, right? That makes you feel, or that made me feel, a lot more rooted.
Yeah.
Like genuinely rooted to the
Well,
world.
and the very fact that you can do that, and going around with a smile is always a much better way to be anyway. And it does affect your outlook. And people will react to that. And they'll react typically in a positive way, which is so great.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's just true, I'm leaning more into this now, more and more, especially the last couple of months and potentially years, is how do I reflect outward the best of my experience of the world and the best of myself, so that other people can, I'm not going to try to make anyone feel any sort of way, but maybe to inspire, maybe to put a smile on somebody else's face. That's something that I have loved leaning a little bit more into.
One of the lessons that I've learned from working with a number of guide dogs is that they really take on or are affected by their handlers, their humans. And if you tend to act very nervous and very stressed all the time, or if you suddenly are walking with them and you get lost, or you think you're lost and you're stressed, they're going to react to that, because guiding is a very stressful job. And people who truly learn to understand the whole aspect of dealing with a dog know that for the most part, and there are exceptions when a dog is abused or whatever, but so for the most part, they want to please. They want you to tell them the rules, and they want to be able to obey the rules and do the right thing. And if you act positive, if you don't act panicky and you don't act stressed, then they're going to be happier and they're going to do better. And I have no better example of that than escaping from the World Trade Center. I could have been very stressed going down the stairs and been very nervous toward Roselle, but I knew that what I needed to do was just continue to tell them, what a great dog. Good job. Keep going. What a good dog. And that in turn, as I did that and she detected from me that I was okay, she was okay. So that if something were to suddenly happen and something affected her, immediately I would know, okay, something is not right here, but it's not the dog. There's something else going on. But otherwise, interacting is such an important thing. And I think that's just as true with a person-to-person interaction. If you act positively and so on, if you act joyously, for the most part, unless somebody's just really not connected, then they're going to react positively to you too.
Yeah, yeah. Michael, I love that you shared the story of you and Roselle. And I also know that your current guide dog is Alamo, right?
Right. Who is over here asleep on the floor.
Oh,
bored.
Oh my gosh. I'm very curious. Do you feel that, I mean, I think the answer is yes. I was going to ask the question of like, do all of your, or have all your different guide dogs have had different personalities?
Oh, yeah.
And if so, like how do you either build off of that? What do the interactions feel like to you, to all your dogs? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, it's still building a team, right? And working with a guide dog is creating a team. So in every case, it is still, they want a team leader. And I know that has to be me. And what I need to learn are the gifts and the strengths that each dog has. And they figure out what works with me as well and the strengths that I have. But if I am inconsistent and I don't always behave in a good way toward them, then they're going to be frightened or they're going to develop a fear, and that's not a good thing.
Sure. Yeah.
So for you proved that last night with your walk.
Yes. Oh, proved it over and over again, right? Because the more goodness we put out into the world, the more I think we feel richer on it.
Yeah. So you went to college. Now, did you get an advanced degree or just bachelor's or what?
No, I went to grad school. I have a master's in organizational development and knowledge management, because to trace the story there, after undergrad, so for the first 22 years of my life, I was convinced I was going to do a PhD in clinical psychology and go be a clinical psychologist to help other people with their challenges. And then I did a thesis my last year of college, and I decided that, shout out to all my PhDers. I know I have a couple of friends who have either just finished or are in the middle of PhD programs. I decided that I did not want to spend 7 years, 6, 7 years in a windowless basement, like I had my last year of college, collecting data that is ultimately such a deep dive, but not a broad dive. I saw that the impact that one piece of research, aka my piece of research, the impact wasn't going to be as broad or expansive as I would have liked it for it to be. So I decided to extay going to get a PhD in clinical psych, and instead sold my soul to consulting, which a lot of people did. I promised myself I wouldn't, but I did. But in that organization and in that job, I learned what it means like to feel a cog in a machine and to feel as just a mechanistic part of an organization versus a valued human. Like, of course, I had amazing coworkers, and I had amazing coworkers. I was going to say things about bosses, but
Well,
I
there's
had
that
amazing
too.
coworkers. Yeah.
And some bosses can be good if they really understand what it means to be a boss, but that's a different story.
Yes, I think it is that. And I also think it's the systemic structure of the organization. So the way that that organization was structured was not systemically designed to amplify the individual gifts of people. It was meant to squeeze out all of the labor that they could. But I don't think, like, I'm not trying to badmouth them. I think that's the design of a lot of organizations today, right? Like, truly. And I study organization, so I see it in real time. So
but the other side of that is that when that's all they do, they tend not to value nearly as much the human aspect of it. And the companies go toward being a less human oriented, less person oriented organization.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And that's not to say that like that experience didn't give me so many valuable experiences. Like I got to be one of the only folks who got to travel internationally, right? I got to do really impactful projects that gave me a lot of the skills that I still use to this day. But what it also opened my mind to was the fact that if we work for the majority of our lives, we should be doing work that feels joyful, meaningful, purposeful, and ultimately uplifting. Not on all days, of course, but for a majority of the time, because that's our livelihood. And so I decided to switch jobs, got referred into a job in higher education. So I moseyed back down from DC to Charlottesville, Virginia, but at the same time had applied for grad school in organizational development and knowledge management. So it's commuting back and forth on the weekends for in-person classes while working full-time and living full-time in the middle of Virginia. So those 2 years were just 2.5 years, were an insane flurry of activity, of full-time work, full-time grad school. I was doing Toastmasters, which is a public speaking organization, was working out, was managing or navigating a long distance relationship across the country. It was a lot. It was a lot. And what a bountiful season that was.
Yeah, long distance relationships can be a big challenge.
Definitely. Yeah, we had started out as like medium distance, and then he had moved across the country, and I was like, okay, well, that was a good lesson. One of my best friends to this day. I love him with all my heart. He's an amazing human.
Is he still across the country?
No, we live we used to live in the same city. Now he's in a different city, but we see each other occasionally.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Did you ever develop a family, or is it still just you?
It's still just me. I am very blessed by the people that I have in my life, the relationships that I have, the friendships, but I feel very
I kind of figured that because you talked about taking the walk yesterday, and that was my impression. But still, having relationships and having good, positive relationships and long-term ones are still very important things to have anyway.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So you got your master's degree, and then what did you do?
Then I realized that, I've got my master's, the work that I was doing in higher education, which was helping high school students and their families build up a good profile, a good set of activities, a good sort of pathway towards competitive college admissions. That was all fine and all, but I needed more impact. And I quit that job after finishing grad school, and I decided to kind of say, F it, we're moving across the country, because I had visited Los Angeles a couple of times when I was in grad school and working full time, and I just absolutely fell in love with the city. It was something that was so vibrant, so sunny. The people were nice. The mountains were so close by. And I remember I was on a run in Los Angeles in December 2018. And I remember looking out over I think it was the 5, it was one of the freeways. I remember looking out over the 5. It's like, I am so darn happy. like this is just this moment of elation that this is where I needed to be. And then 6 months later, I drove across the country to land in LA and have not looked back for a number of years now. It's been a magical journey since.
Wake up to the Hollywood sign every day.
Yes, actually, I can see it from my window. No, truly, I really do. I wake up and I'm like, there it is. Hello, Hollywood.
Yeah.
And I just, the reason I'm sharing the story about moving across the country is because there was an ethos in me that was present and that had been building, which perhaps some listeners can resonate with. The ethos was this: she dreamed it, so she did it. Right? It's kind of like if I was 111 years old on my deathbed, looking back at my life, what are the things that I wish I would have done? What are the things that I wish I would have said? And I read a lot about like books on and studies on regrets of the dying or things that people wish they would have done. And I wish I worked less. I wish I spent more time with loved ones. I wish I took more risks. So
yeah,
decided to really lean into that and just said, kind of, let's do it. Let's just start a new adventure.
And is it nice and toasty down there today?
Today is the perfect day I think in the low 80s. It's going to be a scorcher this weekend, somewhere in the 90s.
Yeah.
But I've got, friends in Sacramento. They're like, yeah, it's 108. And I was like, whew.
Yeah. But their hot air comes from the capital, so it's a different story. But but it's like 93 here in Victorville, so yeah, and it's supposed to get hot too. So we'll see.
Wow! Thank goodness for AC, right?
You better believe it.
Oh my goodness, I live in a historic building, and it doesn't have AC in the living or the dining room, which is where I work from. So lots of fans. We're circulating air here, but it's fine.
And fans help a lot.
Yes, they do. I am their number one fan. A fan.
I get it.
I know that you're a huge putter and a joker, so I wanted to insert that one in there.
I get it. So you moved out here, and what did you start to do then? You started your own business?
Create the systems, the processes to help people thrive at work, because that's, my degree was very much into that. And I loved it, Michael. Like, it was such an incredible time to be able to build. So I built out an onboarding program, a learning development program, performance development, really helping folks thrive. And months later, the pandemic hit. I just arrived in LA, was just kind of getting settled, making, friendships and relationships. And then we experienced this huge blowout, right, of the world. And a month after March 2020, my company merged with another company. And so there was layoffs, there was restructuring. It was a pretty dark time, to say the least. A very, very dark time.
What did you do?
Cried a lot.
Okay. That's fair.
I think so. I think a lot of people did. Felt the weight of the world and realized that, yes, the world absolutely feels exorbitantly heavy. Yes, I was pulling 15 hours a day working on my own work, on side projects, on just trying to run on the wheel of productivity. Remember when we talked about briefly how I kind of alluded to the fact that it was difficult for me to relax? Still very much the case, but during that time, especially in the 2020s, 2021, 2022, very, very difficult to do so because there was always more to do, always more to be done.
Yeah.
But I realized that that's not sustainable, and I was extremely burnt out. So I couldn't go anywhere. Some of the hiking trails were closed because I would, let off steam by hiking, running. They were closed. And I was like, okay, I got to do something within my locus of control. Again, going back to our initial conversation. And I just began taking walks around my neighborhood before work, during work, after work, and just noticing all of the ordinary things that were ever present, but really spending deliberate time and attention on them and seeing what meaning I could impart from those things. So just today, I was thinking about this. I stepped on a really, really crunchy leaf, and I was just like, oh, it is so crunchy, sent tingles down my spine. Things like that, right? Things that we just encounter in everyday life that are so plain, so quotidian. But what if we could really revel in their ordinariness?
So you put up with a lot with all of that, and then how have you come out of the COVID environment and so on?
Yeah, I think I came out of it pretty darn well. I when my company merged with the other organization, that was also a lot of work because, again, went from being a team to being the sole person. So I was heading learning and development, was also doing people operations. Really good opportunity to develop programmatic, I guess, skills. So like really build a program for a 400-person international global company, of how to actually build systems, processes, and micro habits in place so that people could learn, right? Because I think we are nothing if we don't learn, if we don't stay curious.
Yes.
And during that time, when I was exiting that job to go work elsewhere, I also decided to write a book because I was approaching a milestone birthday and I'd wanted to punctuate that period of my life with an exclamation point versus just our standard ellipsis, right? 1 year into the next. So I was like, no, I want to make this big, go out with a bang.
Yeah.
And decided to write a book because that was a very, very hard thing and never done before. I have written for the majority of my life, but
Writing a book is different.
it's different. It's very different. So yeah, and started my new job, started the book, and moved in with my then partner all in the span of 1 month. And that was such a beautiful, expansive, wondrous season. I was very grateful for that time.
And so, what exactly are you doing now?
So right now I work as a leadership facilitator where I teach managers and executives leadership skills. And I'm also a coach for high achievers to help them get from where they are to either a higher place, or however they define that, or to a place of more calm or peace, especially for my fellow high achievers. It can be very difficult for us to relax. So I really help them with building out those micro habits sustainably so that they actually enact behavioral change that they would like to see.
So, are you doing this for someone else or your own business now?
For myself, yeah.
Ah, okay. So, you have now branched off and taken the leap into your own business. And all the paperwork and all the forms that the California Secretary of State requires.
Well, this is it's a to be expanded type of deal because I still have my day job.
Yeah.
So focusing a lot of efforts there.
So what's your day job?
So I leadership trainer. I facilitate learning experiences for managers and execs. So I teach things like influential communication, feedback, strategic thinking. Like yesterday, I taught at a I don't want to say the name, but a famous well-being health company, and it was just really, really cool to be in a space with the executive team, with the CEO at the helm, and it's like, wow, we get to talk so meaningfully about things that actually matter. How do you build a sustainable feedback culture at this young organization? How do you, as leaders, model these behaviors that ripple down to the business, down to the organization? And it's a deeply, deeply meaningful work.
So you do a lot of different things relating to organizational development. You're a speaker, you're an author, and so on. What's your core motivator?
I think it goes back to your beautifully articulated beginning sentence, Michael, of creating a more joyful world. For folks who might be tuning in visually, I'm wearing a yellow shirt. Yellow is my color, just because it's the color of light, the color of expansion, the color of possibility. And I'm some days I'm a sheer optimist. Some days I'm a nihilistic optimist. Happy to dive into what that means as well. But
Sure.
Essentially, I really believe in the goodness of people, both as individuals and the collective power to be good and do good. And I think that each of us, and I really say this with so much conviction, and not like everyone's good, but just a true conviction that people are so good and we have the capacity to do amazing things and to affect others in positive ways. That does not mean that we're always going to be perfect. That does not mean that we're never going to hurt people's feelings or potentially even do unsavory things. But what if we could live in a world in which we want to see? Right? I know that there's a famous quote in there, but I love the feeling of being able to connect people, being able to make them feel like they matter. That's what it is at the end of the day. I want people to feel like they matter.
And that helps you too.
Yeah, it gives me a deep sense of meaning, a deep sense of purpose, purpose, yeah.
Well, And personally, from my perspective, I love what you're saying, and it makes perfect sense. I don't think that people are born bad. I think it's a learned behavior that oftentimes too many people ascribe to, and it's something that really we need to deal with and recognize that there's a lot more power in being good and loving than anything else.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Michael, let me ask you this question. I'm sure you've been asked it before, but I'm curious what your response is in this moment. What drives you to do the things that you do, to spread your message, to spread awareness, to do, hundreds of speaking engagements a year? What motivates you?
Well, I think probably somewhat the same thing that you do. I want to inspire. I want to educate people. I want people to learn more about blindness, and that our view of disability is totally wrong. Disability does not mean a lack of ability, and that every person on this planet has a disability of one sort or another. We could delve into that, but the reality is, I think that anytime that we can contribute to making people have a better outlook is an important and a good thing to do.
Yeah. Is that something that you felt yourself cultivating as a child, or something that you grew into?
I always wanted to be a teacher, and my first job out of college took me in a different direction, sort of. But I ultimately realized that being a teacher doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be hired in a class to teach in a classroom or whatever. And that in fact, most of all the jobs that I have had, including what I do today, is all about teaching. And that it's important to teach the right and important things. And that in reality, I can't teach anyone anything. They have to teach themselves. All I can do is show the way.
Yes. Yes. I love that. And what is it that keeps you going, right? Because sometimes being a teacher is difficult to continually have to exert some or a lot of ourselves to do so. What keeps you going?
Well, I think that's a fair question, and I'm going to turn it around in a second and ask you the same thing. But for me, look, I believe that people are good. I love life. I love the fact that life is an adventure that we all should share in. I think that there is an absolute relevant world of morals and ethics and so on. And so it's always frustrating when I see people totally ignoring morals, totally ignoring ethics, doing some of the things that we're seeing people do in our world today. But I ultimately have seen too many examples of life is really composed mostly of good people, and we can be better for it. And we need to really emphasize the good and the love part. I'm with Henry Drummond. Love is the most important thing in the world. And it is something that will transcend everything that we deal with. And if we don't do it, it will destroy anyone who really decides not to truly be a loving individual. So it keeps me going, knowing that some of those things are true, some of those things work. And I want to continue to help motivate people to do better and be better than they are. And maybe it's the quote you were thinking of, the whole Gandhi quote of be the change you want to see in the world.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
And how about you?
Yeah. I think about this question as it is interlaced with the topic of burnout, where in today's, well, yeah, and I would say in today's society that folks are more prone to and experience more burnout more than ever. The reason that I contrast that is because at the end of the day, while systems, organizational systems, worldwide systems, global systems are like not designed for necessarily human flourishing, because if you look at the 8-hour workday, right, that is an archaic practice from the 50s, from the line of factory work, that some people are definitely not working 8 hours. Some people are working way more, but the human brain and body are not designed to sit in a chair for 8 hours a day and look at a screen.
Right.
That is my soapbox. Wow, I love taking a stand on this. And I say this because it can get very exhausting to show up over and over and over again. But I think that what it boils down to is that, to your point about making a brighter world, if we have a choice to show up as loving, as kind, as caring, why wouldn't we? Right? It almost seems like to me at least, I mean, I might be biased, but it almost seems like the natural choice. But I also think that this is not something that many of us consciously step into. Like I had to get there. I had this really
Yeah.
powerful lesson from my prior relationship where my former partner and I, we were living together, had a great relationship. He's, again, still one of my best friends, different partner than the other one I mentioned. And he told me, he's like, Katya, like, you nag me a lot, right? You like tell me like what you wish I did more of, what I'm not doing right. Like you don't tell me as much the things that I am doing right. It's like, oh my God, you're so right. Like I wasn't giving him that positive reinforcement that we and research affirms is crucial for strong relationships. Because according to adult learning theory, adults learn best by positive reinforcement, by doubling down on the things that they do well. And ever since he said that to me, I like really took that to heart because I asked him for feedback after we broke up. I was like, hey, give me some feedback on how I can be a better partner. And it was really, really valuable. And that's one of the lessons that I carry forth with me. If there's a way that I can positively amplify someone else's experience, someone else's work, someone else's, anything that they do, why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
Right? It makes it better for everybody involved. And it feels so good for both parties
Yeah.
involved.
And you're not doing it from the standpoint of arrogance. You're doing it from the standpoint of love and because you want to really be a helpful part of humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And it's sometimes like, yeah, it can take effort, especially when we've had a day. It can be very easy to say like, well, the world is dark and I'm tired, right? So I'm going to go like wallow. And of course, like everyone does that. I do that too. But when we have the choice to show up as our best selves, why wouldn't we?
Yeah. So tell me, what do you think having an unstoppable mindset means?
I love this question. I was reflecting a lot about this in preparation for our conversation today, Michael. I think there's the tangible resilience skills, the things that we can learn, right? All the coping mechanisms, being aware of how stress shows up in our brains and bodies, employing techniques like deep breathing or the two-hander technique or, inviting cognitive offload. All of those terms, by the way, are terms that I teach for my day job, which I just love. But essentially there's the hard skills, right? Like if you experience this type of stressor, here's how you can cope. That's one way to be unstoppable so that you have the systems, the mechanistic systems in place to get you through hard times. But I think there's also the flip side of being unstoppable is having the belief that you are able to overcome any challenge that comes in your way. And if not overcome to your ideal desired level, that there's lessons that you can take from it. So if you overcome it, amazing, great, you've made it through, made it past. If it didn't go quite as planned, that there's takeaways to help guide you on the next iteration, the next chapter. And I think that sort of intangible, the second flavor is the more intangible, that limitless belief, that instead of a limiting belief, that you are capable, that you are able, and that in the end, things will turn out however they turn out.
So I'm sure that you've had in your life, and you can point to times that you've had to face adversity. What's gotten you through it? How do you do that?
Yeah, I was actually just discussing coping styles. Like there's different types of coping styles of stress. And my typical coping style is just robot mode. I'll share with you a story that about almost a decade ago, actually now, I was in a near fatal head-on collision. And it was a really hard time. Everybody walked out. It was all good. Well, all good. I put that in quotes, air quotes. I expected after that I would just go back to life and like, maybe take some time to recover, maybe like rest. And I did not, right? I just continued pumping out at 100%, 150%, just the way I had been before the accident. And I tell this story because when I tell my participants about the story, I'm like, I should have learned to take better care of myself. I should have learned to slow down and actually rest. And I didn't. But what got me through is that like, okay, like this is going to be a hard season. I'm going to just go robot, do the things that I need to do to stay afloat. But what I've been learning recently in the last couple of years is to actually listen to my body. If I'm tired, maybe that's an indication that I should take a break, right? What a curiosity, what a thought. So just knowing to answer your question more directly, Michael, to get through hard times, knowing that there is going to be a different time, a time that I feel 1% less bad tomorrow.
So let's go back to going robot. Does that also mean when you're just doing things, if you will, by rote or being a robot, that it gives your brain time to think and to process? And then, of course, you have to listen to what comes out or learn to listen to what comes out. But does that then, by giving your brain a chance to process, if you think that is true, then it is truly a healing mechanism that then allows you to come out of it stronger and better for what you do.
Yeah. I really think it's a way of compartmentalization where I know that there's things that quote unquote have to get done, right, in order for me to carry on the way that I've been living. But I also think it can be maladaptive because I sometimes may not take enough time to grieve, right, or to process. I journal a lot, so that is my sort of grieving mechanism. And lately, again, as I said, I went through a lot of heavy things this past year. Actually allowing myself the time to just like go on a mountaintop and cry, as sort of movie like as it sounds, it's really, really cathartic and healing to say, okay, Katya, like these are the things that are bubbling up, let them out, as opposed to squashing them down and dealing with them never so that they're unresolved.
Yeah, I think that's part of the issue is that if you just push them down and you don't pay attention to them and you don't deal with issues that come up, then they're going to come up and get you in the end anyway.
And intensify potentially.
And intensify.
Yeah, exactly. I think having the sense of community around as well. I'm curious, Michael, how this shows up for you, but I haven't been really great at asking for help, especially in my younger years, because I'm like, I can do it on my own. I grew up very independent, talking to adults, as I mentioned. And so I was like, I can do everything myself, right? But now I'm like leaning on my community. I'm like, hey, friends, like I'm feeling really bad, like help, or like, what would you do in this situation? And everyone has shown up in just such the most kind, loving way. And just remembering that there's people who want to be in your corner.
And people who care.
Exactly.
Yeah, I have learned, especially and talk about it since September 11th, that, but I think I've learned it long before then, especially working with guide dogs. It's all about teamwork and team development. Yeah. But I think that there is a lot to always be said for having a team. Yeah. And we may or may not necessarily recognize it. And sometimes we may even just want to push the team away. But when we truly interact with a team, interact with the people around us and let them into our lives, it is such a wonderful and very powerful thing to do.
Is there a moment like that stands out for you in your life?
Well, immediately what I'm thinking of is that my wife of 40 years passed away last November. And so we had been married literally 40 years. So suddenly I was alone in a sense because now she wasn't here. I did have a few months to sort of prepare for it because we knew what was happening. Just her body started slowing down. She'd been in a wheelchair her whole life and her body just started slowing down, and that happened for her. But suddenly, no matter what you think, it was suddenly there. And now she's no longer here. Although I love to tell people she's watching somewhere. And if I misbehave, I'm going to hear about it. But still, it's different now. And one of the things that we did was I decided to have a meeting, kind of a celebration of life, which we did in January. We did a service for her in the middle of January where we spread her ashes, and then the next week we did a celebration of life online. And people came from around the world, literally, to participate in that for her. And I realized how much not only she, but I had in such a blessing with so many people who wanted to continue to be part of our lives.
Beautiful.
And it worked out really well. So I love to stay in touch with people, but I also now value even more times of quiet. So I can go through a good period of time and not turn the TV on, not turn the radio on or anything, and just have it quiet, or I'll just read a book, and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. I really appreciate you sharing that story, Michael. That's such
I think it is important that we all need to take time to collect our own thoughts, and that we need to value other people, but at the same time, we also need to recognize that we have to value ourselves and our lives. And ultimately, again, we're our best teachers, and we have to teach ourselves all of that.
Yes, and teach ourselves not once, not twice, but iteratively, right? Like set up potentially even systems or habits to remind ourselves to spend time with ourselves, to check in, to journal, to write, to do whatever it is that makes us feel centered.
I'm a firm believer that people should take some time every day to just think, and as I talk about it, introspection. That is something that we can do, and people will say, "Well, I don't have the time to do that. I've got too much to do." Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Always have time.
Yes. I also used to be one of those people who's like, I don't have time. I'm literally doing I'm working 15-hour days. I'm moving from one thing to the next. And when I share people my schedule, when I let them see my calendar, they're like, Katya, this is insane. I'm like, I know it's insane. That's why I don't have time. But there is always time in micro moments, right? Lately, I've been finding meditative moments on I bike to the gym, or I walk around the neighborhood, or I deliberately, if I can't sit still, which it is very difficult for me to sit still, then I'll find that stillness as I'm physically moving, right? And the mind just calms down. I'm a rock climber, so whenever I'm on the wall holding on for dear life, that is such a perfect opportunity to think about nothing else matters besides this moment. That is it, right? You're literally holding on.
And the reality is we always do have time. It's just that we make the choice not to. And that's the problem that each of us has to grow out of.
I wouldn't even view it as a problem, right? Because problem
or say challenge. Somewhat.
But it makes it feel like you are at fault for not carving that time.
Yeah, and I hear you.
Yeah. And this is still a unresolved thing for myself too. And I share this, right? Even though I coach people on this, it's still something that is such a constant work in progress. And that's why I really like thinking about the micro habits, right? How can we design systems in a way that we don't have to think about implementing this every day? We've already designed the backbone of the system that can carry us through.
How do we get people to do that?
Well, we get them to think about their motivations. So starting with the why, what is it that ultimately matters to them? And then it's kind of asking a ladder of whys, right? And why does that matter to you? And why does that matter to you? And what's at the true core, right? What is the core of your essence or your being? And then connecting behaviors back onto that. So mapping it to sort of this giant tree trunk of why, where all the branches are the possible behaviors or the possible habits that folks might build. So for example, one of my clients wants to build a little bit more structure in their morning schedule. And, schedules are great. Structure is great, but why does that matter, right? What will that ultimately give to that person? And so we were able to unpack that a little bit deeply in a way that the outcome was a sustainable, chunk of time every day to connect back with themselves, because that was something that they were truly wanting and desiring.
In 30 years, how would you like people to remember you in your life? Not that you've passed away or anything, but in 30 years, there's a lot more time for people to develop memories about you.
Definitely. I love that you asked that question, Michael. I'm going to marinate on it, but the answer that comes to mind is I would like to be remembered as a source of light, love, joy, and levity for others. And that's kind of vague and nebulous, but I leave it vague and nebulous to be able to land up to the interpretation of each person, right? So if I can be that person that is able to make someone feel at least 10% better, if I'm that person who can help them craft systems, or who can help them craft an environment where they do feel their most powerful, empowered, joyful selves, then I will have lived a great life.
And you would have done something that's really great.
Yes.
What advice do you have for people who are listening to this?
In general?
Uh-huh.
I love I love how at the end the big hitters come, Michael. I love your style. Um,
That's just are
hmm,
questions that come to mind. It's not that they were
yes.
planned. I just want to be honest.
It's the serendipity, right?
It is.
Um,
It's
I
God
think
talking. But anyway, go ahead.
I think it's to continually remind ourselves that we have a choice in how we see the world and to
Hmm.
choose to see it in a way that ultimately is serves us and serves other people best. So my specific personalized version of it is to see the joy in the everyday, to find little treasures, right? Little moments of joy and wonder in the everyday. That's my own ethos. Yours might be that um, you know, you leave the world feeling you leave each day helping one person feel inspired, right? Whatever the flavor of it is, the advice that I would impart upon folks, if I could have like a billboard that would shine across the entire universe, or maybe let's just keep it to Earth, planet Earth,
That's
I
okay.
would
It can be the
say,
universe.
right, in this one, um, is to remember that we have the choice to show up and to try to show up as fully ourselves and as fully our best authentic versions of ourselves, because that's all
And,
we have.
and I like the fact that you talk about it as a choice because it is a choice.
It
And
is.
we can choose to do that or not. And I think
Yes.
that's the important part about whatever we do. We have the choice as to how we want to live.
Mm-hmm.
We may not always be able to control some of the things that happen to us, but we always have the choice as to how we deal with it. And
Yeah.
that's what's really important.
Yeah. And also making the space that if we don't feel like or cannot show up as our best selves that day, to not like get overly hard on ourselves about it,
Yeah.
right? Because of course, sometimes we're going to have off days, off weeks, off seasons, and just keep coming back to it with love. As
And
much love
don't
as we give outward, give it to ourselves.
get hard on others either.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. Don't let that spread.
Well, this has been fun. I know you've got to go off to another meeting because you're just so popular. So I do want to thank you again for being here. And I hope that all of you enjoyed this. Please let us know what you think. I would appreciate it if you would reach out to me. You can email me at michaelhi@accessibe.com or go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. Love, of course, as I always say, but I do mean it. We really would appreciate 5-star ratings from you wherever you're listening to this. But Katya, how can people reach out to you and maybe take advantage of some of the things that you do and so on?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And absolutely, plus a million to what you just shared about reaching out to you, Michael. But if you want to get in touch, and honestly, do truly mean this too, please reach out. It's just Katya at katyadavidova.com. If you're on Instagram, it's at Joy in Plain Sight, all one word. And if you want to find me on LinkedIn, it's Katya Davydova. If you're someone who is interested in coaching and want to explore options for building more sustainable habits for a life flourishing, I'm in your corner. I've got your back. Let's have a conversation. Again, Katya at katyadavidova.com. It'd be amazing to hear from you. I think you might be on mute, Michael.
Spell Katya Davydova for us.
Sure.
Yes.
Katya is Katya, and Davydova is Davydova. Davydova.
And you wrote a book.
I did. Called Joy in Plain Sight.
And how can people get that?
You're welcome to either find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, I believe Target, all your online retailers. If you want a personalized signed copy, I have a couple of those still left available, so I'm happy to mail you one. Feel free to just email me, Katya at katyadavidova.com.
Cool. Well, Katya, I want to thank you once again for being here and for doing this. It's been a joy and it's been a pleasure, and we need to do it again.
Yes. Michael, thank you so much for cultivating this space. I just feel radiantly connected and extremely grateful for having this opportunity to chat with you.